A Snicker of Magic, Chapter 8. Shannon Buchanan, don't you cry for me. I come from downtown in Ducktown with a banjer on my knee. Dave Grissom slapped the knee of his worn-out jeans as he sang. He kept his other hand squeezed tight around the big fat steering wheel of the bus, thank goodness. Midnight Gulch was full of fog and rain, and even though our fog looked pretty billowing out of the mountains and over the roads, driving through that mess can make a person nervous, especially if you're being driven by a Grissom. Dave's radio was broken, he said, so he decided to serenade us. His voice crackled as loud as old radio speakers when he sang, and I kind of liked the sound. I like how some people say it banjer instead of banjo, Jonah said. Makes it sound more special. I pinched Jonah hard on the wrist. Ow, he said, and he pinched me hard right back. I thought maybe you were a ghost, I said. I figured that's maybe how you've been in business for 50 years. Jonah sighed. I can't explain stuff about pumpernickel here on the bus. I'll tell you later. When later? Soon as we get off this bus later. Everybody sing, hollered Dave Grissom. We sang along as the bus circled around the mountain roads of Midnight Gulch, then down into that valley, then past the sand-cut apartments towards downtown. The bus zoomed past the gallery that Aunt Cleo told me about. I squinted real close, trying to see magical pictures underneath all the layers of paint. But my eyes weren't attuned to pictures, only words. And the only words I saw on that wall were the ones somebody'd spray painted there. They trembled and shivered against the bricks. They didn't belong. They should let somebody repaint the gallery, Jonah said when he saw what I was looking at. But I don't know if anybody in Midnight Gulch has the knack. My mama has the knack, I said, and I remember the summer when she always had paintbrushes in her pocket and paint freckles in her hair. I couldn't understand how somebody who liked to paint as much as Mama could just up and stop. Put the brushes away and quit completely. I wondered if she'd ever start again. I wondered if she even wanted to. I sighed. She used to have the knack, anyway. You know about her a lot, don't you? You worry about her a lot, don't you? I nodded, remembering what I'd seen last night. I'd waited up, like always, until I finally heard the soft click of Mama's key in the door lock. I rolled off the inflatable mattress and crawled to look down the hallway. Mama sat on the edge of Cleo's couch with her head braced between her hands. I held my breath, afraid she was crying. But I didn't hear any sobs, didn't see any tears. I didn't see any words either, but I'd never seen words floating near Mama. After a time, she stood up and walked to the window and leaned her forehead against the glass, and I knew. Somewhere out there beneath the stars and shadows, the road was calling out to her already. She was itching to go again, and we'd only been there a day. Before long, we'd set out. We'd load up the jalapeno and leave another town, never to return. Just like the brothers Threadbare. She's always looking for a reason to leave, I swallowed, no matter where we go. Jonah nodded, but didn't say anything. At first, I was afraid talking about Mama made him uncomfortable. But when I glanced over at him, I realized his forehead was crinkled again, like he was thinking up some tremendously great idea. Maybe that's why you have to do the duel. So much for great ideas. How you figure that? Maybe if your mama sees you competing in the talent show, sharing your words, if she sees how happy you are here in Midnight Gulch, then she'll want to stay for a while. I wish it was that easy, I groaned. Maybe it is, Jonah said. And then he leveled me with one of his deep dimpled grins, the kind that made me feel like butterflies were tap dancing inside my chest. If Jonah didn't grow up to be a professional do-gooder, he should be a politician. With a smile like that, he could convince anybody to do anything. Someday, I might work up enough nerve to talk to him about his marvelous smile, but not yet. Instead, I turned my red face towards the window and concentrated on the foggy mountains surrounding Midnight Gulch. I haven't been to this part of town, I told Jonah. Mama first said no when I asked if I could spend the afternoon with him, but then Aunt Cleo said she'd take Franny for the afternoon, and they'd have a big time together. So there I was. You'll get to see plenty of the town today, Jonah said. We're one of the last stops. I'm taking you to meet interesting person number 1. He knows all about pumpernickel. Jonah grinned. Even better, he has inside information about the Threadbares. How? I whispered. You'll find out, Jonah smiled. Tell me more about the way you see words. Can you poke them? Can you kick at them? Can you hold them in your hand? Sort of, I laughed, but no more than you can hold a soap bubble in your hand. Words are pretty while they last, though. They never look the same. Sometimes words are blinky bright, firefly bright. Sometimes words are shadows. I collect them on my shoe if I run out of room in the blue book. Show me. Jonah's green eyes sparkled. I pulled off my sneaker and hoped to heaven that my striped purple sock didn't stink like a dead skunk. Jonah inspected the words I'd inked along my shoe. Sometimes words cluster together. They're cloudy. I pointed to the hill. It takes a while to pull the words apart and decide which ones I want to keep. Some words have thin wings when I see them. Others hum. They make an electric sound like they'd light up if I plug them in. The words that hum and buzz are the ones that can't stand to not be said, I figure. I pointed to the white stripe over the toe of my shoe. Kaleidoscope. That one sparkled and it had a sound. Popped like Coke Fizz until I wrote it down. What's aardwolf? Jonah tapped the hill. It's a hyena that stays up all night and eats termites. Excellent, he nodded. I already know what paradigm is. He traced his finger across the inky purple spikes of the letters. Paradigm was a fun word to collect. It copied along the ceiling of the pickled jalapeno over and over. Same word, but it spun out at least 100 different ways before it finally dissolved. Did this word dance when you found it? Jonah pointed to a pirouette. Spun through the air, I said, and nodded. It reminded me of a purple ribbon. Jonah raised his eyebrow. Spindidly? I saw it on a carousel at the fair. I don't think it's a real word, so I gave it a meaning. Spindidly means better than awesome. Did you see sailboat bobbing along on the ocean? Nope. Vehicles and motorized things have words around them, but they never make much sense. They're fun to say, but not much for keeping. I saw sailboat in a rinky-dink antique shop near Myrtle Beach, hovering around a fake sailboat. One of those little bitty boats they keep in glass bottles, dreaming of what it could never be, I'd guess. What's this? Jonah asked. Needler, I said. That's what Aunt Cleo calls a person who won't mind their own business. Like when I try to eavesdrop on Cleo's conversations with Mama, she'll say, Felicity, stop needling in. Jonah nodded. My mom's a needler. That's mean. She wouldn't be offended. She'd say the same of herself. She says her first job is styling hair and fixing carburetors, but her favorite job is sorting out other people's business. Jonah and I both laughed. Will I meet your mom today, I asked. Probably not today, but definitely soon. Jonah split apart a granola bar wrapper. Crunch, cluster, cram. Those words shot out into the air first, but then he pulled the granola free and broke it in half to share with me. He gave me the bigger half. Felicity, can't you picture yourself at the duel, sharing your words just a little bit? Truth be told, I could picture it easy. And as I pictured it, my heart dropped somewhere in the vicinity of my belly button. I thought of standing on a stage with shaky hands and tingling ears and sweaty lips. I thought of how my words came out twisted when I tried to say them in front of all those people. My words were a mess to everybody but my family and Jonah. Uh-oh, Jonah said, you look like you're about to puke. I sighed. That's a possibility. Day, Jonah yelled towards the front. Pass back Lee barf bucket. Once the barf bucket made its way back to our seat, Jonah held it towards me. Okay, he said, launch, and he turned his face away. I'm fine now, I said, and I smiled in spite of all my nervousness. I'd never had a friend willing to catch vomit for me. Jonah seemed relieved that he wouldn't have to be that friend either. He tucked the barf bucket under the seat and said, What's the word you see most often, Felicity? Lonely, I said. I see it all the time, mostly in school and in church and in malls and in driving down the road, always the places where the most people are. Isn't that weird? Probably not, he said. Probably not at all. Do you see a word close to me right now? I nodded, and I nearly laughed out loud again. It's a word I've never seen out and about before, not on any other person ever. Splendiferous. Splendiferous. That's your word. It's yellow and with 6 legs, and it's crawling up your arm. Splendiferous, huh? Jonah glanced down at his arm, even though he couldn't see anything. I like that. Tell it to stay for a while, okay? But when he said that last part, he looked right at me, at the freckles on my face and the laugh on my lips and the sad in my stare. If his green eyes had been lasers, they would have zapped right through me. He smiled as he reached out for my wrist, and I thought he might pinch me again the way I pinched him. But instead, he grabbed the red pen he kept clipped to his newspaper, and he wrote that word, Splendiferous, right on my hand in the messiest letters I'd ever seen. There, he smiled. That's the first word I ever collected. Keep it safe for me? I felt my face heat up, so I looked at my lap instead of his face. I realized I still held half of his granola bar. My hands were sticky and my wrist was inky. My heart pounded out the happiest melody, yes, I'd heard in a long time. Bus 5548 dropped Jonah and me off in front of a swirly, spiraled gate. The rain was only dribbling by then. A thick river of fog rolled around my ankles. Maybe it was the fog that made the mansion behind the gate look extra creepy. Or maybe I decided the house doesn't just look creepy. Maybe that house was so spindidly creepy I shouldn't be walking towards it. I thought about pinching Jonah one more time to see if he was a ghost, but then I noticed something else. Jonah must have seen the surprise in my eyes because he said, "Decent-sized house, huh?" But I wasn't even looking at the house anymore. I saw a single word threading through the rusty gate, threadbare. Jonah wheeled up to the speaker situated on the gate and pushed a button. When the speaker buzzed, Jonah sat up tall in his wheelchair and yelled, "Pumpernickel." The gate startled me when it swung open. I sure noticed the house then, all 3 stories of it. The mansion was made of pale gray stone. Maybe. It was hard to tell because the stone didn't show much through all the ivy dripping down from the gabled rooftops. Red flowers bloomed bright as needle pricks out of all the green. Raindrops clung so tightly to the petals that every flower looked covered in diamond dust. "Oliver owns Dr. Zook's Ice Cream Company," Jonah explained. "People sure must love ice cream," I said. "It's not just the ice cream," Jonah said. "Oliver created a special formula that makes the ice cream stay cold for at least 24 hours, even if it isn't in a freezer. His invention revolutionized the world of frozen novelties." I pictured Oliver as a cantankerous old millionaire sitting in a dark office in the farthest corner of that expensive stone house. He'd probably be wearing a black suit. He'd probably have a pinched face and wiry glasses and a beard. Definitely a beard. He probably never looked up from his desk. Jonah's wheelchair made a steady zzzz as he led me down the foggy walkway to Oliver's mansion. The yard was bordered by fancy hedges, trimmed with animal shapes. A bear, an elephant, an anteater, a lion. The tallest hedge, so tall it could have been a tree, was cut into the shape of a hot air balloon. We passed by 2 tall columns with stone gargoyles situated on top of them. Both gargoyles had a pair of sunglasses positioned over their eyes. Beside the steps leading up to the porch, somebody had built a sturdy-looking wheelchair ramp. Before he could get there, the front door squeaked open. An elderly lady stood in the doorway, and she was plump, the way grannies sometimes are, pillowy and huggable-looking. She kept her white hair tied back behind her head in a poofy bun. She grinned at us and clapped her hands and ran down the ramp, squealing. "Should I be afraid?" I asked. "Charlie Sue Hancock is Oliver's assistant. She gets excited over company." Charlie Sue ran at full speed, both arms straight out like she might take off and fly. Should I duck? But I didn't have time to duck. Instead, I oofed as Charlie Sue swooped in and flung her arms around me and Jonah both. She smelled like coffee and expensive perfume. "Welcome to Midnight Gulch, Felicity Pickle," she hollered, pushing me back to take a good look at me. "Laws, Jonah," she said, "you were telling the truth. Felicity is plumb adorable." Plumb adorable? Plumb adorable? My face turned bright red, prickly red. I'd never been called plumb anything before. I didn't glance at Jonah to see if his face was prickly red too, but I had a feeling it wasn't. Jonah never seemed embarrassed over his words. Not that those were his words. I was certain Charlie Sue Hancock was elaborating. Mega elaborating. Elaborating to the 10,000th degree of elaboration. "Oliver said he'd meet you both in the boardroom," said Charlie Sue. "He's been on the phone all day with some clients up north. They're wanting a shipment of blackberry sunrise, and Oliver's been telling them no sir, no way all day long. You know how he feels about that one." That's his most popular flavor, Jonah told me, but Oliver won't let them sell it anywhere besides Midnight Gulch. Why's that? I followed Jonah and Charlie Sue into Oliver's mansion. 'Cause that stuff's got a little secret ingredient. Charlie winked at Jonah. We call it MAGIC. Oliver's boardroom was actually a library, a good library, a library where books looked worn out and well read and loved on. The library was 2 stories tall with a balcony that wrapped around the top level. The big window on the top floor was propped half open. A rebel beam of sunlight pushed through the clouds, shining through the rain beads stuck to the screen and glass. And then that strange golden rain light shone warm and pretty over Oliver's books. I wondered if the sun had missed the books, had waited as long as it possibly could to shine over those spines again. I knew how that felt, to love a story so much you just didn't want to read it, you wanted to feel it. And Jonah was right about Oliver's mansion being good for word collecting. I wasn't really participating in the duel, of course, but if I were, Oliver's house was a perfect place to collect. I saw them everywhere. So many, hundreds and billions and trillions of words. Woven across the ceiling, shining as soft as the September sun, I was surrounded by words and stories and dust-speckled light. That's a pretty perfect way to be. In the center of Oliver's library was a round table. Jonah pulled a chair out and wheeled underneath the tabletop. While he prepared for his meeting, I explored the first level of Oliver's library. The walls were mostly covered by bookshelves, but one wall was full of maps and photographs. There was a map of Midnight Gulch and another map of the state of Tennessee. Tennessee was poked full of so many stick pins that it looked like one of Cleo's stuffed hedgehogs. Pictures were propped against the books on the shelves, black and white photos of people, mostly. Jonah pointed to a colored picture in a frame made of aluminum can lids. See that one right there? That's how I first met Oliver. The photograph showed a little white building. A line of smiling kids stood in front of it, grinning toothy big. They looked Franny Joe's age. Can you keep another secret? Jonah asked. Yes, I said, which was mostly true. I knew as soon as I got home I would tell Biscuit. I tell her everything, but as far as I know, she doesn't go blabbing to anybody else. Jonah said, I started saving up Coke cans a few summers ago. I took them to the recycling center and saved up all the change, and eventually I had enough money to build a little school for some kids in Haiti. My uncle is a missionary there, and he's always sending me letters about the dreams he's working on. One day I read his letter, and my know-how kicked in, so I started saving. I looked at the picture. I looked back at Jonah. How many cans did that take? Thousands, Jonah said, but it didn't take all that long. Mom and the guys at the shop all helped me. They all saved up Coke cans and sent them my way. You built a school? His cheeks burned bright red. It was a little school. With Coke cans? The red on his face crept quickly from his cheeks all the way to his hairline. He nodded and unfolded his newspaper and started concentrating on the stories there. Keep it a secret, okay? No problem. I sure wouldn't want people knowing I built a whole entire school out of Coke cans. That's definitely the kind of secret you don't want getting out. It feels better when it's secret, Jonah said. Oliver heard about what I'd done, even though I did my best to keep it quiet, and one thing led to another, and he appointed me the new beetle. The new beetle? I asked. What happened to the old beetle? Why even call it a beetle? You'll see, Jonah said. He pointed to the air all around us. See any words worth keeping? I see a sky full of words. I scribbled furiously in my blue book. Becoming. House again. Ravel. Serendipity. Summer. Ice cream, Charlie Sue hollered as she pushed a silver cart through the library door. She set down tall glass ice cream dishes in front of me and Jonah. Then she spread a towel across the center of the table and set out 6 cartons of ice cream. I still wasn't sold on Dr. Zook's ice cream being the best thing to come out of Midnight Gulch, but that's because I'd only tasted Aunt Cleo's carton of chocolate chip pork rind, and I'd gagged 4 times. The flavors Charlie Sue set out looked a whole lot more intriguing. Orangey's caramel apple pie, Virgil's get out of my face fudge ripple, Andy's snickerdoodle sucker punch, Jim's just vanilla all I want, Day's chocolate orange switcheroo, Marsh Mallory mocha delight, I'm partial to Aunt Lily's lavender rose water, said Charlie Sue. Are they all named after people, I asked. Not all of them. Jonah reached for the chocolate orange switcheroo flavor. People in Midnight Gulch like to send in their ideas, though. If it's any good, Oliver gives them credit. Jonah plopped a spoonful of chocolate orange switcheroo into my glass. Try this one. I took a small bite to start with. The ice cream melted against my tongue, sweet and fruity and smooth. Then came the switcheroo part, a chocolate fudgy flavor that caused the corners of my jaws to tingle with happiness. Bittersweet, tangy, citrus. Crazy good. I watched the words freeze against my ice cream glass. I stopped to write them down, and that's when I noticed a very familiar word drifting across the table. Stoneberry. Stoneberry, I mumbled. Makes sense, Jonah nodded. Like I said, Oliver has done all sorts of research on the Weatherly brothers. Didn't need to go far for research, said a man in the doorway. Even though I knew that man had to be the mysterious millionaire Oliver, I was still a little surprised because Oliver did not look like a millionaire. He looked like a farmer or a cowboy maybe, but mostly he just looked like somebody's grandpa. Oliver was shorter than I'd figured he'd be. He had a shiny bald head and a fuzzy white mustache. He wore faded jeans and a flannel shirt rolled up to the elbows. Hey, yo, Oliver grinned at me, and good morning and welcome. He didn't talk like a millionaire either. When he reached to shake my hand, I noticed a dark tattoo on his forearm, but I couldn't make out what it was just yet. Hey, yo, and thanks, I said. Oliver glanced at Jonah and raised one fuzzy eyebrow. Pumpernickel? Jonah nodded. Felicity's the one I told you about. Remember? She's cool. All righty then, Oliver nodded. Jonah says you're interested in the Weatherly brothers, Miss Felicity. Yes. Yep, I answered. Oliver pulled a picture frame off one of the bookshelves and handed it to me. The photograph was old, black and white and faded, but I could tell that the man in the picture was young. His dark, shaggy hair fell down over one eye. He wore overalls, sized a bit too short for his long, lanky frame, and he held a banjo high up, right across his chest. I could tell he wasn't playing that banjo, though. His hand clutched too tightly around the neck. I wondered if he was just in a habit of holding his banjo over his chest to protect his heart. Maybe that banjo was a shield to him. Maybe he felt safe behind it. Oliver tapped the picture frame. Barry Weatherly. He was a famous magician, but you've heard that already, I reckon. I nodded. Well, Oliver sighed, there's always more to the story than what you've heard. Here's what most people don't know about Barry. He liked cold weather and hot coffee. He loved to sew, and he loved to tell stories. Stories were his best magic. And Oliver's fuzzy mustache turned up at the edges when he smiled. Barry Weatherly was my grandfather. I'd be happy to tell you more about him, the truth about him. Yes. My heart pounded over Oliver's words. My heart always pounded out a yes when people were fixing to tell me a good story. Felicity, Jonah finally said, in case you haven't figured it out yet, this is Oliver Weatherly, the original beetle of Midnight Gulch.